going to talk about symbols and abbreviations. Now, symbols and abbreviations are great. They're useful for outlines and for notes, and on outlines they are considered free. So in the IEW curriculum, you get either 2 or 3 typically words per line on your outline, plus any symbols and abbreviations that you want to add. But the rule for those, to make sure that we don't end up drawing incredibly complicated drawings instead of writing words, is that it must take longer to write the word than it takes to draw the symbol. So you can't make an incredibly detailed drawing of a tractor, for instance, if it's easier and faster to just write the word tractor. Now, written outlines and notes can often be better for this, specifically for symbols, because there are a lot of symbols that you can make up or you can draw that you are not going to be able to easily do on the computer. Although I will show you some that are available specifically in Word, but typically most word processors have about the same versatility when it comes to symbols. So we're going to talk about symbols first and then abbreviations. And we're going to go through some of the common ones. And the goal here is to sort of pick up maybe some ideas of symbols you haven't used before and to think sort of about how you can expand your use of symbols and abbreviations. So let's go over to, there we go. So here I just have a clipboard, and the most basic symbols, the ones you're probably going to use most often, are just going to be your basic mathematical symbols. So we have, addition, subtraction. You're going to have, if you can use division or multiplication symbols if you want, but the addition and subtraction ones are most useful because you have sort of the and or without. Then we also have things like equals, which can mean equals to or also the same or any sort of equality. And then we also have our not equal symbol, which is specifically useful on the computer because in a lot of outlines you can take a word like, say, cat. And if you want to say not the cat, then on an outline that you write, you can just circle it and put a line through it to mean not the cat. But on a computer, that's a lot harder to do. So on a computer, you'd probably have to do not equals cat. Something to that effect, unless you have a strike through, but even a strike through sort of indicates that you meant to take the word out of the outline. So typically I'd say one of these are better. Now, you also have greater than or equal to and less than or equal to, so that would be these. And these are deceptively useful because especially when you're talking about things like population or better than, worse than, you can use these as interchangeably. For instance, you might say that the long sword is always longer than a saber, but they can be the same length. So you could say long sword would be greater than or equal to saber. Something like that, which would indicate more than just a mathematical relationship. You can also use it to indicate sort of magnitude or goodness or anything like that. So these are good ones to add to your catalog of symbols if you don't already use them. We also have more specialized symbols. We have scientific symbols like degrees. That's a good one. We can use degrees Fahrenheit, degrees Celsius, degrees of an angle, and also degrees of sort of, again, magnitude. So you might say a greater degree of evil. This might be a way to express that in an outline using 2 symbols and 1 word instead of, or you could just say more evil, but a greater degree of evil might be more what you're trying to say. Another one that's good to know is delta, which looks like a triangle. It's drawn like this. You can get it on the computer as well, and we'll sort of talk about that in a minute. But the delta is a symbol that means change. So anytime things change, you can use delta, usually in the scientific world, to indicate that there is a change in, say, temperature or in quality or volume or whatever. But We can use it also in our outlines to mean that there is a change of some sort, like a change in height or a change in roles. So that's a useful one to have. And then of course we have our general symbols. These are things like our arrows. We have like the up, down. We have right, left. Again, you can get these on the computers, but with outlines specifically, these are good to be due on the paper because you can draw them however you want on a paper. So let's say we have Joyce has a dog. Kasdan has a cat. And the cat does not like Joyce. Now, we could just say J, but if we're using, this is a more complicated outline and we are out of words, then we can just draw an arrow over here and point to Joyce. Now, something that you can do on paper. It's much harder to do on a computer unless you want to start drawing on the computer, which is a lot harder to do than drawing with a pen. So arrows are very useful, especially in actual hard copy outlines. With your computer outlines, you're going to be a lot more limited with what you can do with those. There are also some others that are more typical sort of typed symbols. We have the @ symbol. This is a good one, especially in storytelling, because it's a good indicator of where things are happening. So he's at the castle, they're at home. You can use this instead of writing at, and that makes it a free symbol. You also have something, I don't even know if I can write it correctly. It's kind of like this. It looks really fancy. It's called an ampersand. I'll type it on the computer. That'll be much better than me. I don't know how to draw it correctly. It means and, so you can use it interchangeably with the plus. And then we also, of course, have quotation marks, question marks, exclamation marks. So in an outline, you can use an exclamation mark to show excitement. You can use it to show sort of any sort of raised emotion. And then a question mark, of course, indicates question, uncertainty, and those are useful to use as well. Now, in outlines, we tend to put things in quotation marks that we're actually saying, or that someone is saying. So these are sort of useful to have in mind. And then, of course, you can also have things like your emojis, which can be typed or drawn. When they're drawn, they tend to be a lot easier because you can just literally just put down whatever face you want. So happy face, flat face, sad face, tongue sticking out, whatever you want. On the computer, you can use emojis, but it's often a lot more complicated because then you have to find where they are and add them in. So I'll sort of go over some of the ways we can do that next. But yeah, when we're using paper outlines, we have a lot of versatility. You can also do things like come up with your own sort of symbols. One that I like to do is if I ever need to draw a fish, I just do this. It's a little loop, and that's a fish. That is not a symbol that I believe is on the computer. So, and then you also might do something like a fire. You could say that's a fire if you wanted, or water. Any of these sort of symbols you can come up with when you're writing on paper. It's much harder to do that on the computer, which is why it's generally, in my opinion, better to make your outlines and do your notes on paper. So that is my favorite. However, you will probably have to use computers at some point, even though it's less than ideal. Let me find where that sorry, it's on my seams. I have too many of these. What can show you this one? This one. There we go. Okay, so here we have just a Word document, and I'm going to show you how to do some of the symbols on here. Now, a lot of the math symbols are going to be on the keyboard. You just have to find them. So we have plus, minus, equals. For not equals, you're going to have to go over to your symbols, which is going to be under insert, which is right here. right there. And then you're going to go over to symbol. And then this is the symbols panel. I have to move my face. Oh, not that. No, this one. There we go. So here are all of the, oh, not like that. Okay. Here are the symbols, and if you go to mathematical operators, you'll get the not equal symbol, which is here, and that'll add it in. Now, we also have the greater than equal to, less than equal to. Those are both here as well. And so those are the mathematical symbols. In terms of degrees, I believe you also have to use these symbols for that. We do have arrows over here, so like I said, you can get some arrows on the computer. And degrees, I forget where that is. It's somewhere though. We do have an infinity. Oh, this is a circle. I think this is degrees. Yeah, that looks fine. Basically it's just a circle. Delta is on here as well. It is under, should be under Greek. It's under one of these. It's somewhere in this list. As you can see, there are a lot of symbols, and most of them are not going to be useful. A lot of these are for other languages and for specific needs. Oh, here's the delta. It's under Greek and Coptic. So there's the delta. You also have your omega and alpha in here somewhere. This is the E that sometimes means energy and scientific stuff, but you can kind of see how much easier it is to just draw the symbols than it is to find them in these catalogs. As for the others, we have the at, that's going to be on the keyboard. This is the, I believe it's called ampersand. It's this fancy little symbol right here. It is a way of saying and, just like the plus. If you want to be fancy, you can draw that one instead. And then we have, of course, our question mark, exclamation mark, and then quotation marks, those things. Now, as for the emojis, you can do things like that or that. Those are both going to be sort of faces. You can see they're sideways. So that's going to be your happy face. That's going to be your sad face. And you can do other things like, that would be like the tongue sticking out. That would be a emotionless face. You can do sort of things like that. It is a little bit more complicated, especially since you can't just draw it. But you can get away with doing those sorts of things. So those are symbols, sort of an overview. Now we're going to move on to abbreviations. And here we are back at this. So for our abbreviations, I'll just use the back page. There are some standardized abbreviations that it is good to know. Some of these are countries. So a lot of countries have two-letter abbreviations. So it's not dark enough. So US stands for United States. UK stands for United Kingdom. Other countries might have 3 letters or 2. I think AUS is Austria or Australia, one of the two. We like Germany, I think is GER. Those are countries. States will also have their own abbreviations. So like I think Delaware is DE, Washington is WA, Colorado is CO. States have their own, and then sometimes specific cities might have abbreviations, not always. Airports always have their own codes, so like DFW stands for Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. DEN is Denver International Airport. I don't remember any of the other ones, but all the airports have their own abbreviations. And then most currencies will also have their own abbreviations. So in addition to something like a dollar sign, the abbreviation for the US dollar is USD. Now, you may notice that there are a lot of things that could have abbreviations, things like states and countries, airports, monies, you could have cities, provinces. All of these things will have their own potential abbreviations, and so it's very important that you should keep your abbreviations straight, which means sometimes most of the time I'd say it's a good idea to make a key, especially if you're taking notes, because if you don't, you're going to end up looking through your notes and you're going to have no idea what an abbreviation is. This is especially true if you're working on something with like science or medicine, where there are a lot of different abbreviations and they all can mean different things because there are only so many letters. So let's say we're going to have, oh, here's a good one. What is it called? I don't remember what it is. Okay, I had one. I forgot about it. I forgot what it was. But let's say we want to have a company-wide initiative. That's a CWI. That's one I've heard before. So if you're going to be using this in your notes, then you're going to want to make sure that at the top of the page of notes, you want to make a little key, and you're going to want to write CWI, company-wide initiative. And this is especially important in history and, like I said, science, because they have a lot of overlapping abbreviations. I think one example is the IRA. It's an abbreviation that stands for a whole bunch of stuff historically in the United States. So always make a key, make sure you know what you're talking about, and then it's also good to keep an eye out for any specialized abbreviations that you can add to your sort of list of abbreviations that you can use. So I worked as a pharmacy technician for a while, and one of the abbreviations I learned was PRN, which stands for as needed. Now that's one that I don't use all the time, but when I do need to write as needed, it's much easier to just write PRN. Another one you could do is BID or TID, which I believe means twice a day and 3 times a day. And these are both part of the pharmacology. So PRN, that's a good one to memorize if you don't know it already. You can use it, and when you're doing your plans, you can use it, and it just pops up. It's useful sometimes, and so yeah, that's a good one. And then there are also sort of more common abbreviations. So you have things like with, so that's a W/, and then of course we have without, so W/OUT. And then you have things like etc., which means and so on. And then there are a whole bunch of others that you will just come across as you go. But again, make a key, especially if you have a lot of abbreviations, because you will come back to it and you will not remember what it's supposed to stand for. So I know that this has been a very short stream, but I hope it has been useful. We sort of went over some symbols, abbreviations. If there's one thing you take away from this, it is make a key if you're going to use even one abbreviation, because you will come back to it and you will not know what you were writing about. So I hope you enjoyed this live stream. I hope it was helpful. Next week we're going to talk about summarizing, which is a great skill. Thank you so much for